Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Kris. You just saw me take a drink. Okay. I was asked to, they didn't know, and I apologize for your name. You asked me to do the Fredericksburg, Robert E. Lee's Greatest Victory video, and I told you that I would find a video. You didn't know much about the Civil War, and it'd interest you, and so this is a video that I have seen before, a long time ago, way long time ago. How old is this video? 4 years. Okay, yeah, so I probably saw it in 2020, somewhere around there. And it's been done by other people, but this is it is oversimplified, but it's a really good grasp on what the Civil War was. Now, this is a 30-minute video. I'm going to break it down into two because I have that really stupid thing where I like to talk a lot. And so, that's probably what I'll do now. So we're going to go ahead and break this down. It'll be two 15-minute videos. It'll probably be much longer because, so
this video was made possible by NordVPN. Click the link down below to get 70% off an annual subscription, plus an additional month free. Also, stun your friends, turn heads, get compliments. Buy yourself some OverSimplified merch today, along with a very honest new character pin. Link in the description down below. Okay, Mrs. Lincoln, this is it. One last push, and we're done. 9 months and 4 days ago, my father brought forth upon my mother himself and gave to her a child, conceived in a shack in Kentucky and dedicated to the proposition that I will drink num-nums from a bottle and do little poo-poos in my pantses for the next 2 to 3 years. Now what is it babies do again? Oh yeah. I am not touching that.
Just a side note, anyone who cares, Abraham Lincoln's mother, her name was Nancy Hanks, and that bloodline, which is clearly related to Abraham Lincoln, Tom Hanks, the actor, so, he is related to him. Just so you know, if you were curious.
Abraham Lincoln grew up with his relatively poor family in Kentucky, eventually moving to Indiana, and finally, Illinois. He read a lot of books, worked a lot of jobs, wrote some questionable poetry, and finally entered the law profession. Despite being self-taught, he turned out to be a pretty clever and astute lawyer. In one case, a guy claimed he witnessed a murder at night, and Lincoln was like, "How could you have seen anything in the dark? There was a bright full moon." A what? A bright full moon. Can you say that again, please? There was a bright full moon. A dim half moon? No, a bright full moon. That's funny, because according to this almanac, there was a dim half moon that night, which makes you a liar. Well, I got a bright full moon for y'all right here. Now that's what I call a rebuttal. Lincoln and his cheekbones weren't only interested in law, however. He also dabbled in the world of politics, serving as a legislator in both local and national assemblies. And what a time it was. Not even 100 years after the Founding Fathers wrote all men are created equal, politicians were already asking, yeah, but what does that mean exactly? It means all men. Yeah, but what does that mean exactly? And not just that. States' rights versus the federal government. What are the executive powers of the president? Is cereal a soup? The Founding Fathers left some of these questions perhaps a little too open to interpretation. And the biggest question of them all was slavery, an ugly mark on what should have been a revolutionary new nation based on liberty and democracy. Thomas Jefferson had written a condemnation of slavery in the Declaration of Independence, but out of fear of losing Southern states' support, it was removed. Hey guys, do you think leaving this a little vague will create any unforeseen problems in the future? Cannonball! And those unforeseen problems were now beginning to rear their ugly heads. As the nation developed, the North and the South developed along two very different lines, and two very different cultural identities emerged. northern cities began rapidly industrializing, while the southern climate allowed for large plantations of labor-intensive crops. As a result, one half of the country didn't rely on slaves, while the other half had become economically dependent on them. In 1793, Eli Whitney's cotton gin caused the slave trade in the South to explode. While in the North, a growing abolitionist movement was taking root. A general mistrust began to develop between the North and the South, as Northerners felt the South were hell-bent on expanding slavery, and fear spread throughout the South that the North wanted to take their slaves away. In 1819, there were 11 free states and 11 slave states. A perfect balance. A happy medium, a harmonious relationship. Hey guys, nice to meet you. I'm Missouri, and I would like to become the 23rd state. Hey buddy, welcome to the nation. We'll be happy to accept you as a free state. Oh no, you don't. You're trying to get one over on us. Missouri's gonna be a slave state. Okay, listen, why don't we just ask Missouri what it wants to be, and we slave state. Well, then, allow me to introduce to you the newest, freshest state on the scene, Maine. Hey, you can't do that, and you can't have any more slave states above this line. What? The issue of slavery is solved, and it will never come up again. A few years later, it came up again. You see, as America expanded westward, each new state or territory that was added threatened to upend the delicate balance between the slave and free states. If one faction managed to outnumber the other, it could gain an easy majority and force its own ideals on the opposing side, leaving a huge portion of the population feeling spiteful and oppressed. For a while, compromises kicked the can down the road and kept the volatile balance in check, as new free and slave states were roughly added in pairs. But then one loudmouth state just had to barge in and ruin everything as usual. The addition of Texas saw the United States enter into a war with Mexico, which they won, gaining a huge amount of land out west and creating even more problems. Hey guys, nice to meet you. I'm California, and I would like to become the 31st state. Hey buddy, welcome to the nation. We'll be happy to accept you as a southern slave state. Oh no, you don't. You're trying to get one over on us. California's gonna be a free state. Okay, listen, why don't we just ask California what it wants to be, and we can free state. Well, then, allow me to introduce to you the territories of New Mexico and Utah, able to freely vote for slavery themselves. Hey, you can't do that. And we can enter Northern Territory anytime we want to recapture escaped slaves. What? The issue of slavery is solved, and it will never come up again. A few years later, it came up again. In 1854, a Democratic senator from Illinois wanted to build a really cool choo-choo train here and proposed that the territories of Kansas and Nebraska be created open to slavery, even though they were clearly above the Missouri Compromise line. Obviously, the northern states were like, hell no. But the Southern Democrats who controlled Congress at the time were like, well, if you love liberty and democracy so much, then you should let them vote on whether slavery should be legal or not. And so it was. Huge numbers of pro- and anti-slavery settlers rushed to Kansas to sway the vote in their favor. And while they were all there, they began to beat the crap out of each other. One of those settlers was a man named John Brown, a former businessman who failed at just about everything he tried and went arguably insane. He was a radical abolitionist and dedicated much of his life to the Underground Railroad and freeing slaves. One night, in revenge for an earlier raid by pro-slavery forces, he and his sons killed a number of pro-slavery settlers in the territory, helping to kickstart years of violence known as Bleeding Kansas.
I like John Brown. I respect him. I don't agree that his choices of how to abolish slavery was to go on a killing spree. And it's just not the right way to do it. I don't know what the right way to do it is when politically it was divided, but going on a killing spree isn't the smart answer, because he was going on a killing spree to kill the slave owners and then freeing slaves and using them to go along in this revolt. And it just wasn't good.
Kansas and Nebraska both eventually voted in favor of outlawing slavery. But from here, the tension began to grow at a rapid pace. In 1852, author Harriet Beecher Stowe penned Uncle Tom's Cabin, a best-selling novel that exposed the terrible cruelty of slavery to the world. Oh, how awful. How morally corrupt a nation must be to allow such things to happen. Your Majesty, what should we do about all the starving children working in the coal mines? Nothing! In 1854, the Republican Party was formed, and Abraham Lincoln emerged as a leading figure. Southern Democrats viewed the new Republican Party with mistrust, believing it to be radical and abolitionist. In 1856, a politician named Charles Sumner gave a speech in Congress, calling out slave-owning Democrats with fiery language. If slavery was a woman, she'd be an ugly one, and the senator from South Carolina would like to boink her. Representative Brooks, do you have a rebuttal? Oh, I have a rebuttal, all right. Yeah, here's a rebuttal for you. Oh, come on. Surely this isn't allowed. I don't know. I'll have to consult the rulebook. I can't find anything about caning a political opponent, but it says here I'm not allowed to wear women's underwear. Uh-oh. News of the violence on the Senate floor took the nation by storm. Southern slave owners sent Representative Brooks new canes to replace his now broken one. And on the floors of Congress, politicians carried weapons in self-defense, which is never a good sign. In 1857, the Supreme Court ruled in the Dred Scott case that all people of African descent, slave or free, could not be citizens, and therefore could not sue for their own freedom under any circumstances.
The Dred Scott case, I only pause this because Dred Scott has ancestors today, and I don't know what she is. She's a granddaughter. However many times you're supposed to say grand before you get to daughter. But she gives speeches just talking about his life and stuff like that. And it was very interesting. I wanted to go see her and I missed it. But I thought it was very cool. I was trying to get her set up to go to Springfield, Illinois, to go to Abraham Lincoln's home, because I thought that would be pretty cool, because there's pictures of there's a section there with Dred Scott and then John Brown. It talks about all that being one of the catalysts towards the eventual Civil War, and I wanted her to go there to talk and everything, but they couldn't get it worked out. So but you know, it was still cool.
Undoing years of progress with the strike of a gavel. Now, within all this bitter debate over slavery, there were many nuances. North versus South, Republican versus Democrat, states versus the federal government. But let's strip all of that away. For 4 million individuals living in America, this wasn't about political intrigue or party alignment. It was about the basic human right to be free. Men, women, and children were stolen from their homelands and brought to the American continent, where for generations they were considered to be property, forced to live in poverty, and work from sunrise to sunset.
I just want to add, they were stolen from their homes. And that's true. But the people who stole them from their homes were other black people, other black tribes. Not trying to point the blame. You got to be honest about these things. They were stolen and kidnapped from their own homes or whatever, sold to whatever country was there in exchange for weapons or things like that to help win, because they were having civil wars. And so I'm not trying to diminish a country or a race, but I'm just saying that it wasn't just white people showing up stealing. It was white people of a variety of countries working with black people from Africa, working together to kidnap and sell. So it was terrible for both sides. For the people who were taken, terrible, because they never saw their families again. For the people who were doing it, they had to understand that eventually they themselves could have been stolen and sold into slavery. And the people might have given them guns for 2 years, helping them out. And then all of a sudden, there they are, and they found out the hard way. They themselves could have been taken. They themselves might have known this face, this white face, and that white face did not care. You were now going to be sold, so just a terrible thing.
plantation overseers did whatever they felt was necessary to get the most out of their slaves. Punishments were often barbaric. Families were regularly separated, and parents could often only watch, as their children were auctioned off, never to be seen again. Thousands of slaves took the treacherous risk of running away, and abolitionists in the North helped many escape via the Underground Railroad as bounty hunters entered the North to chase them down. Leading figures within the abolitionist movement included many significant free black men and women. But it's important to note that for many of the anti-slavery white individuals in the North, opposition to slavery was often an economic issue, not a moral one, as many worried large plantations.
The people in the North might have been for abolishing slavery, but that didn't mean they wanted to set them free to live next to them, to live next to the white people. No. Just because we wanted them free, and why I say me, I mean the collective at the time, just because, we wanted them free doesn't mean we want them near us. That would have been your northern white people's way of dealing with it. And a lot of them wanted them sent back to Africa to start a new colony. Monroeville was one of them. I think it did get started. I don't know how long it lasted. Sorry. It's about 9:30 on a Friday night. So, and I'm chilly. But, just because they were abolitionists didn't mean they weren't racist and didn't want them near them.
Plantations would take their lands and livelihoods away. Abraham Lincoln knew that slavery was a moral evil, and he regularly spoke out against it in powerful speeches that helped him rise through the ranks of the new Republican Party. He lamented at the hypocrisy of a great American nation meant to stand as a shining beacon of freedom, while also enslaving 4 million men, women, and children. He most famously declared in 1858 that a house divided against itself cannot stand, that one day, slavery in America would end. However, even Lincoln was cautious in his opposition. He didn't want to outlaw it entirely, but simply prevent its expansion, so that given enough time, he believed it would naturally die out. Thankfully, history would force his hand. In October 1859, one abolitionist decided he'd try to single-handedly take down slavery by force. Who would be crazy enough to even attempt such a thing? It's our good friend, John Brown. He planned to seize arms from an armory in the town of Harper's Ferry, free the slaves there, and continue south, inciting a major slave uprising along the way. A noble cause, a bad plan, and terrible execution. Brown's men took the armory and some hostages, but were quickly surrounded by one Robert E. Lee and his U.S. Marines. Brown was captured, and a couple of months later, he was executed for treason.
When he was captured, he was held up in Harper's Ferry with his other companions. Robert E. Lee sent his second in command, which I think was Jeb Stuart, who general for the Confederate Army. And this is before the Civil War, clearly, but I'm trying to think of the year. 1856? No. I don't remember. I've already forgotten. Anyways, Jeb Stuart shows up and basically says, are you going to surrender or not? And John Brown, at this point, they were completely surrounded. He knew he wasn't getting out. And John Brown basically said, no, we're not, we're fighting to the death. Basically dooming all the other people. I said basically a lot there, and I do apologize. Forfeiting the lives of everyone else who, they were all in on it. They all wanted this, but I don't know if they wanted to go out like this. So what happens, if I'm understanding this correctly, is that some Marines stormed the it was like a fire station. They stormed it, and a couple of them got in, and John Brown was stabbed with a bayonet and then had his throat cut. Now, I don't know how, clearly it wasn't severe enough to have killed him, because he was hanged, I think is the term, several months later. And where he was hanged, they had, it's actually now a backyard to someone's home, but they had the military all around, and Stonewall Jackson, not yet Stonewall at the time, Jeb Stuart, a lot of Confederate soldiers that you would know were all there, and they were all like blocking roads because they were scared that there was going to be this big push to come in and free him. And so the military was ready to defend what, he had been sentenced, and so they were going to hanged him. I said that wrong. Sorry, I know.
Northerners sympathized with Brown, but Southerners were like, you see this? They're coming for us. Soon, there'll be 1 million John Browns. 1 million John Browns? What on earth are you thinking about? A John Brown farm? Yeah, me too. To make matters worse, new northern free states meant now the southern states really were outnumbered, and they were beginning to feel bitterly spiteful and oppressed. Further fear began to spread in the South when news broke that a relatively unknown figure had just secured the Republican Party nomination for president. Abraham Lincoln, mostly well-liked among anti-slavery Northerners, had made some of the most powerfully worded speeches against slavery of any politician at the time. And now, there was a chance that he, and his cheekbones, could become president. For the South, that would be too much. In the 1860 election, Lincoln's name didn't even appear on the ballot in 10 southern states. But much to their horror, when the final results came in, Lincoln had won by an electoral college landslide.
Lincoln was in the Congress. Lincoln was in Congress when 11th President James K. Polk became president and started the Mexican-American War. Abraham Lincoln was this young nobody, and he stood up, and I don't remember his exact words, but he said, where was the first shot fired? Because James K. Polk wanted to take Texas and annex all that and go to the coast, which he did. But Lincoln stood up and said, where did this all happen? And the big political trick was, oh, well, you don't support the troops. And everyone turned on Lincoln. Not everyone, but most people turned on Lincoln. No, you got to support the troops in this time. And they still say that kind of stuff today. And Lincoln's like, I'm not saying I don't support them. I'm asking, where'd the first shots take place? Because he knew that the war, we invaded Mexico and got them to fire first, maybe, and then proceeded to fight them in a war. Zachary Taylor was there and a bunch of other people. So he basically left Congress not too long after Lincoln did. Not too long after that, went back to being a lawyer, and then started really getting these feelings. And the Dred Scott thing, John Brown, a lot of these things started getting him back into that political spirit. And he went across Illinois in the Stephen Douglas debates. And Stephen Douglas would give a speech, and then Lincoln would give a speech, and they kind of went back and forth. And they did it, I think it was 6, 7. And Lincoln lost those debates, but his name, people started seeing this prairie lawyer, this backwoods lawyer, who seems to be very compassionate and has a good heart and can speak, but he knew how to put himself down humorously, and that won a lot of people over. And he used that springboard and gave a speech in New York. I want to say Grand Central Station, but I know that's not right. Anyways, he gave a speech in New York, and that pretty much catapulted him even further back up the political charts, and that's what got him to the situation we're in now. Sorry, long-winded response, but just a little back history so you kind of know some stuff.
Lincoln himself tried to calm their fear. How many times do I have to tell you, I'm not gonna take away your slaves? Yeah, right, Honest Abe. We've had enough of you Northerners. We're gonna go form our own country. You can't do that. Why not? Well, if you had won the election, would it be okay for us to leave? Of course not. Well, why not? Because that's not how victim mentality works. Many states felt that when they joined the Union, they always withheld the right to leave it whenever they pleased. Many people living in 19th century America often felt more loyalty to their state than to the nation. And now, with the South feeling like it had lost its voice in the federal government, they were out of here.
James Madison, the fourth president, said that when you join the Union, you join the Union in like perpetuity, perpetual unionism, whatever I think I made up the second part. Basically saying once in, you're always in. There is no getting back out. Texas likes to believe that they can come in and out whenever they feel like it. You lost that right when you join the Union. They're talking about we'll secede now. No, you won't. Soon as you do it, you're possibly triggering a war. Now, their state militia is one thing, but it's something to keep in mind. Once you're in, it's like the mafia. The only difference is you really cannot leave.
South Carolina was the first to go, and over a period of 6 months, one by one.
I just did a video on the American Battlefield Trust where we covered the bombing of Fort Sumner. Sumner? Why do I always want to say Sumter? Anyways, it was that one. And I thought it was a very cool video. Didn't get a lot of views, but I think it's something that if you want to watch that video to where you get to see the fort and everything like that, it's a very cool video. And American Battlefield Trust is a very good channel.
11 slave states officially seceded from the Union, with just 4 contested border states opting to remain. The seceding states issued a number of official documents justifying their secession. South Carolina proclaimed that it was northern states' hostility to slavery that rendered the federal government illegitimate. Mississippi declared that their position was thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery. And in a speech, the Confederate vice president stated that the new Confederate government rested upon what he called the great truth of racial inequality. Revered American generals, such as Robert E. Lee, opted to side with their states over the Union. And with all the chaos, one New York lawyer wrote that rather than a bald eagle, America's national bird should be a debilitated chicken. And hey, I kind of like that.
To be fair, Robert E. Lee siding with Virginia, everyone in those days viewed your state as your country. So, you can say, well, Robert E. Lee did. Yeah, well, everyone did. Everyone did. It was just we were a country, but you really felt like your state was more your country first and foremost. Because if you got news from your area, from your state. Your city area first and foremost, because that was all you cared about. You didn't really travel. Before railroads, I should say. Once railroads got in, the AP came around, the Associated Press, which was a kind of an amalgamation of all these news sources all around, which were wired in and combined, and so you were able to be in Maine and read about something that happened a couple days ago in Illinois or in Missouri, and it was just like, oh my goodness. So the country, although small, became smaller because you were able to know what was going on. But most people didn't care. They cared about what was local to them. That was their issue. And I'm doing this a lot, and I'm sorry.
One man, watching the crisis unfold, knew it would be his job to solve it. Lincoln was just about to hop on a train and become the President of the United States of America. Hey man, you're hella ugly. Grow a beard or something to hide that face. Good idea. Still ugly.
That's actually true. She didn't catch him on a platform. I think she wrote him a letter and said he would look more distinguished and more presidential if he grew a beard. So if you ever see a picture of Abraham Lincoln without a beard, he was not president. If you see him with a beard, he was president.
With assassination plots already underway, Lincoln had to travel to Washington, D.C. under heavy disguise and protection. All along the way, he received stacks of threatening letters. May the hand of the devil strike you down. You are destroying this country. Damn you, every breath you take. Love from... Grandma? At his inauguration speech, Lincoln once again reiterated that no, I do not want to take away anyone's slaves. But for Lincoln, he did want to preserve the Union. He declared secession to be nothing but an illegitimate rebellion. In your hands and not in mine, he said, is the momentous issue of civil war. You can have no conflict without being yourselves the aggressors. We are not enemies, but friends. It was clear Lincoln was ready and willing to get freaky and open up a can of Scatman John if he had to. Whether he had the support of the people, however, was in question. In the end, it was the Confederates that fired the first shot. As they seceded, the Confederate states began seizing federal U.S. property throughout the South. Off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina, was one such federal property, Fort Sumter, held by a measly, undersupplied U.S. force. The Confederate militia there demanded the fort surrender, a request which was quickly denied, and any remaining hope for a peaceful solution to the secession crisis probably then died when the Confederates did this. The Battle of Fort Sumter is considered to be the beginning of the American Civil War. Many of the Confederates there also considered it to be the end of the American Civil War. They hoped Old Abe would just sigh and say, okay, you win. Unfortunately for them, Lincoln actually said, you're about to get a roundhouse to the face. Lincoln sent out the call for 75,000 volunteers, and men signed up in droves, hopeful for some adventure and good old-fashioned F-U-N. In the new Confederate capital at Richmond, Virginia, Confederate President Jefferson Davis and his cheekbones had also sent out the call for 100,000 men. As ever, both sides hoped for a quick end to the war. Is it over yet? No, Jimmy, it's been 1 week. Is it over now? No. How about now? If you ask that one more time, I swear I will turn this army around and you'll all have to go back home to your wives and children. But in particular,
I'm going to go back a little bit for the next video. But I'll probably just go back to the 15-minute mark. And we'll just go from there. Yeah, something like that. I like the you win. But anyways, maybe I won't go back. I will go back. Who am I kidding? So anyways, we're going to end this here. This is part 1 of part 1. And the reason why I'm breaking it down is because I probably have talked a lot. And because I do that. And this video so far would be 32 minutes. So yeah, we'll go ahead and end it. So it is what it is. There's a thanks button on the channel. You can donate to the channel. You don't have to. You can subscribe. Give a thumbs up. Just like that. You can subscribe. Yeah, why not? Ring the bell. And then don't subscribe to his channel. Subscribe to mine. I brought you this content. You can't watch it without me. All right. And until part 2, which will be coming out tomorrow. Your tomorrow, not my tomorrow. My tomorrow's Saturday. So until then, have a good day. Have a good night.